Brilliant. Right, welcome to our briefing for spring term. I have asked you all to pop yourselves on mute if you're not talking. We have got some breakout rooms, so you'll need to talk for those, but during the main presentations, if you could be on mute, that prevents any background noise. Before we start with our briefing this morning, some of you may well have seen from an email that schools and governors received this morning, the news that Tim Elborn is leaving his post as Diocesan Director of Education. Tim will be greatly missed by many across our diocese, but he's decided to take some time to rest and discern where God is calling him next in his ministry. I'm sure you will join us in praying for him during this time of discernment and also thanking him for his service and contribution to our diocese, to our schools, our staff, and our young people. In the meantime, please do be reassured that our work with our schools continues as normal, and that for school advice and support, do carry on contacting your advisors or contact me if there's anything in particular you want to discuss. Right, over to some housekeeping this morning. As I said, everyone on mute is perfect. We have got some breakout rooms. We're going to try and give you a little bit longer in breakout rooms if we can, because the feedback we've had is that you really value that opportunity to talk to your colleagues. So hopefully, if the timings all go to plan, we'll get a little bit longer in those rooms. And as I said, we are recording. We aim to get this session completed in an hour. All being well, it will be around that. If we do go over slightly, I am sorry, but the plan is for roughly an hour of your time this morning. I wanted to start as well by just thanking you for being here today, because we really do recognise just how difficult and challenging things still are in schools at the moment. Contrary to what we might hear on the news, COVID is very much still here. It is very much still a challenge that you are dealing with on a daily basis. So to be able to take the time out to join us is really, really appreciated. Understand the pressures that are there around pupils still getting COVID, and also around your staff and having to manage lots of staff absence. So thank you for taking the time, and thank you for all your hard work and commitment that has been ongoing over the past 2 years. Now, with that in mind, we thought it was a really good opportunity this morning to spend some of our time in the briefing talking about well-being. And we're delighted that we've got Andy Campbell here with us this morning, who's a qualified coach and trainer. And part of our session will be hearing from Andy with some top tips for well-being and things that we can be doing. I think a new year in January is a really good time to pause and reflect on what we do to manage that for ourselves. We've also slightly extended our governance section today. There's always a spot for Mike, our governance consultant, at our briefing, but we've extended that a little bit. So it's really exciting that Mike's here to talk to us about that. And then we've got a RE update from Ruth Everett, our RE advisor, who is here. That is everything from me. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Andy, who's going to lead us through some thoughts on well-being.
Lovely. I'll come off unmute, and I'm going to start to share, and hopefully you will see something. Can you now see a screen that's got my name on it? Is that right?
I'll go in here.
Excellent. Is everyone here? Perfect. Thank you, Heather. You're already my #1 fan, I know, from one previous meeting. It's always good to have someone on side. So first things first, yeah. So as Carrie said, my name's Andy Campbell. I'm a life coach, whatever that means to you. It might mean different things to you. And I'm a trainer. Amongst other things, I train in an accredited first aid for mental health course. Different versions of that actually. But I also work alongside people in lots of capacities. My background is predominantly in youth work and education, working for both churches and parachurch organisations for most of my career, including a good stint in Walthamstow. So I actually was briefly, for about a year, I think, chair of the Diocesan Youth Committee 100 years ago now, when Paul Butler was still around, or just after he left actually, because he had been chair and I inherited it from him. So my current work as a coach and trainer is to get alongside people, and I'm I say that my drive, my passion, dare I even say in this context, my calling is to help people who help other people. Because as I'm sure some of you know, but of course none of you listening in are this person, but we all know people who are really good at helping other people, but not always so good at looking after themselves. If you do know anyone like that, if it's even you, then my role is to get alongside you and help you. First thing is though, I have no magic wand here. When we're talking about well-being, it's a broad church. And different things mean different things to different people. So what I'm not going to do is give you a long list of things you must do to enhance your well-being, or those of your staff or your students, because the one thing guaranteed to not enhance well-being is to make well-being a task. So if it's something that you feel you have to do, if it's another thing on the list of already overloaded list of things to do, if it's become a burden, then well-being by definition will be detrimental rather than it should enhance you. That being said, I've got a couple of top tips. I did a bit of a survey with people I know who work in and around education about some of the things that I asked them, what would you like on a list if I was talking with school leaders about well-being? What would you like to hear? And this is a kind of a summary of some of the things that they said, along with other things that I'm sure you're aware. I'm really, really conscious that most of this is sucking eggs. Okay, so most of this is stuff that you know, but the trick with well-being, as with almost everything else in life, is to get the balance right between knowing it and actually doing it, actually applying it. So here's the first one. Tell the story well. As a coach, one of the things that I bang on all the time with my clients is the importance of narrative. If you have a clear narrative for what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you're hoping to achieve, who's going to benefit from it, those kind of things, really key narrative, really key story, then everything becomes a lot more possible. Again, I've worked in schools and I've worked in other complex organizations, and one of the really common things for all of us is that we have tasks to do that we don't fully understand. We can't really see what the benefit is. We can't see how we benefit from it. We can't see how somebody else benefits from it, other than perhaps the person who's asked us to do the task. And as school leaders, your place to tell the story, to be the narrator of the school story, of the progress, but not just in a kind of whip beating people up way, but in a really encouraging way, sharing that story in a meaningful way, really does change the context of how people are able to operate. All those tasks that teachers have to do, some of which are really obvious, and the benefit of them is really obvious, some of which are less obvious and feel more of an obligation, and some of them are, aren't they? I mean, I've worked, to say, in and around schools. I know there's hoops that have to be jumped through, that it's really hard to find a really positive, encouraging and exciting narrative for them, but nonetheless, that kind of meta narrative, that bigger story of what we are about, and making sure that every task, every ask, every activity is centered on that meta narrative is really, really important. Another thing, acknowledge the ride. And this is really, really simple, but again, it's one of those things that gets missed all the time. This one came back time and time again in that feedback that I asked people for, that everyone's on the same ride, but everyone experiences that ride very, very differently. You've got NQTs, you've got people who've been around forever, you've got students who are loving things, you've got people who are struggling, you've got people who are full of energy, you've got people who have no energy, and like the different people in this picture, some people are really enjoying it and some people are just terrified. And again, your role as school leaders to acknowledge that ride, to acknowledge the journey that everybody is on, to give people space to honestly and openly express their worries, their concerns, to celebrate the things, to if I can quote the Old Testament, to do a bit of mourning with those who mourn and celebrating and dancing with those who dance, and so on. That's really, really important. So acknowledge the ride, admit that everybody's on it, admit that there's bits of it that are collectively terrifying, bits of it that are enjoyable to some and less enjoyable to others. And then mark and respect boundaries. And again, this is really, really granny sucking egg stuff, but simple techniques about time management, energy management. When people are encouraged to write or read emails, for example, I know that's a big one in schools. I'm a school governor in a secondary school, and I was at a meeting yesterday talking about this, and the school have operated, put in a system where people are not meant to send emails outside of certain hours. And the head was sharing how some staff actually there was a bit of a kickback against that because people wanted to write emails at certain times at the weekend. My kind of well-being eyebrows raised at that point because I was thinking about boundaries. But people, you've got that 1 hour session when finally your head's in the gear, you're maybe gearing up to go back to week, and you maybe want to write that email. We could discuss the rights and wrongs about doing that. But so she reimposed that people could send stuff, but it was this very explicit understanding across the school that no one was expected to read emails out of hours. The caveat, it kind of works or doesn't work. It feels like it's working in that school. But of course, the catch with that one is that then on a Monday morning, there's 100 emails for people to read on what's almost certainly already a busy day. But mark and respect those boundaries, give people time off, make sure that you're not imposing things on other people, and that and also that you're allowed to clearly mark your boundaries and kick back against people imposing on yours where you can. And then offer visible support. And this one's really, really crucial, and it can take so many different forms. A lot of schools I know are taking up coaching, kind of support groups, buddy systems. They're getting in mental health first aiders or other systems. They're deliberately and strategically changing how they do CPD. Some schools are changing school days to give staff time off. I know of schools who have got a half day on a Friday. And alternate Fridays are a CPD type exercise, and alternate Fridays are just if you need to go home thing. That's not always possible for every school, I appreciate, but just as an example of how to rethink things. And this last one, really, I think is probably the most important one for you, and the hardest one to do, I think, often, is to lead by example. Just this idea that, whatever you model as school leaders will be the culture that the school adopts, like it or lump it. If you overwork all the time, people under you will feel the pressure to overwork all the time. If you say don't send emails out of hours, but you're always sending emails out of hours, no one's going to stick to that advisory system. And most importantly, if you don't look after yourself, then you won't be able to look after other people. If you're not being conscious of your own well-being, you're not acknowledging where you're struggling and seeking appropriate support, you haven't got people in school or appropriately out of school who can offer you that support. You're not talking about the support and the struggles appropriately and safely, then your staff are not going to feel able to do that same thing. So model all of the above. Look after yourself. Be honest with yourself about what triggers you, but remember that everyone's on that roller coaster slightly differently. So what triggers some people doesn't trigger other people in quite the same way. I'm racing through these because it's not rocket science, but it's all to do. So just to remind you of the things that I've said so far: tell the story well, have a really clear narrative of what you're doing, why you're doing it. That makes a lot of those difficult tasks, just gives people a bit more energy and enthusiasm to do it if they understand why they're doing it. Acknowledging the ride. Everyone's on a bumpy ride. COVID has been a horrible roller coaster ride for all of us in different ways. Marking, respecting boundaries, offering visible support, and that will look and feel differently in different schools. Lead by example. And my role, if you want me, I've talked to Carrie about this. You've seen some stuff in emails, I think, but I work with a number of schools already. As I say, I offer a training in first aid for mental health. It's an accredited course. There's one that's kind of a general one for workplaces and one that's specifically for working with young people. Both of those courses could be appropriate for your contexts. And I also offer coaching to staff at all levels, and that support, actually, as I didn't say explicitly, but I hope you got the implicit implication. All of this wellbeing stuff has to be true for all levels of staff across the organisation. So make sure that those in the higher echelons of the hierarchy aren't getting benefits that the ones at the very entry level aren't. Support staff are often the ones missed out. Again, that came from my feedback. Support staff often feel left out from staff initiatives around wellbeing, often feel unable to access them. So one of the things maybe to do as and when you have time following this is to find out from your support staff how well they're doing and how supported they're doing, and if there are gaps for them to do. Carrie, I've raced through that. I've taken less time than you gave me, I think, but I was conscious that you had a ever-expanding agenda, so I was happy to do that. I'm happy to answer any questions, clarification, or what have you. And we're going to do some breakout stuff as well, I think. So over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. On the Reflect and Connect email that's gone out to schools today, there is some further information around the First Aider for Mental Health courses. So if that's something you're interested in developing with your staff, then please do take a look at that. Andy, could I ask you to stop screen sharing? Is that okay?
Yes, thank you for the reminder. Yes. Yep.
Brilliant. Right, are there any questions for Andy? Heather, I can see you.
Andy,
Hi, Heather.
For small schools, is there any chance that small schools could bunch together and you could do the coaching across schools?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't really expanded on what coaching might look or feel like, but you know,
No.
often coaching is one-to-one, but group coaching can really work. And actually, I find group coaching really works in these kind of organizations because obviously people have shared experiences, and also that a little bit like I said about being on the roller coaster, you know, one person's perspective on exactly the same thing can be quite different, can't it? That's part of my role as a coach, is to encourage people to look at what else might also be true. If you've got people who are in similar positions who can already see what else might be true, then that could be really beneficial. So yeah, absolutely, there's within reason, there's no limitation on what model.
Yeah, I was just thinking of cost with the smaller schools particularly.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks, Andy. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Do you work one-to-one with staff who are suffering problems with well-being, which are organisationally sort of caused?
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird one. I didn't start out to be kind of a well-being coach specifically, but an awful lot of my clients end up being that. And when I'm working in organisations, well-being is always a factor of it. Sometimes we kind of arrive at well-being issues that weren't the presenting thing but are behind it, and other times you know, the amount of times I've talked about time management with people is just crazy. Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, there's a caution about that, obviously, that if people are struggling with their mental health, I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a trained medical practitioner, so I never offer advice anyway. Anyone who's done a mental health first aid course will know that that's a caveat with all that stuff anyway. But yeah, absolutely, I work with staff who are struggling with their well-being, just to help them. You know, the role of coach, in essence, I think, is to create space where somebody can have decent reflection with themselves. So my role is to create that space, and often well-being is when our well-being is struggling, it's one of the first things that goes, or often one of the things that's caused it is that our perspective is struggling. So absolutely do some work with people about that to try and help them do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at all? Right, in that case, we're going to move into breakout rooms, and we thought this would be a really good opportunity to discuss with your colleagues what's going on in terms of wellbeing. So we've got a mixture here of senior leaders and we've got governors as well. So what are you doing in your schools? What's working well? What would you like to focus on and improve? And then maybe, if you've got time, some reflection on wellbeing from the point of view of a senior leader or a governor. And governors perhaps thinking around your role in the wellbeing of the staff in schools as well. So I am going to pop us into breakout rooms. We will have about 10 minutes for that. Brilliant. I think we should have all of our groups back, which is great. Hopefully that was a useful time just to reflect on some of those messages that Andy gave us this morning, and to share some of the best practice that we know you have going on in your schools. Andy, can I take this moment just to say a huge thank you to you for coming along this morning and talking to
Welcome.
everyone. And as I said, do look out for Andy's first aid in school course that will be on the Reflect and Connect email, and contact details are there too if you want to reach out to Andy.
Yeah, no worries. Been a pleasure.
Thank you, Andy. Right, Mike, it's over to you for governance.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Can I just add, as I share, that I've just received an email from the office. Says the Reflect and Connect will go out this afternoon, so look out for that in your inboxes. I want to just I've been asked to spend a little bit of time exploring governance, so I'm glad to see quite a number of governors on screen. It's great to see about half of us, I think, are governors, and the rest of you are head teachers, so you're also governors. So we're all governors together, like it or not, enjoy it or not. So let me take you on a little journey. If you would like to clarify anything or ask a question, put it in the chat and I'll see if I can include that in what I'm saying, so that we keep on board with each other, as it were, and take you through what I've entitled accountability, which sounds a bit harsh. And actually it's not harsh, it's my message really to governors quite a lot of the time, that this needs to be seen in the context of being a partnership between school leaders and governors who are also known to be school leaders. So we're in this together, and it's not a hit them with a hard question or I've got to tell them, because this is us working this out together in a partnership. And I'm going to give you a kind of Bible reason for this, because if our vision has to come and be derived from some kind of biblical understanding, some Bible passage or whatever, we need to think about that in terms of all that we do. And it seems to me that accountability is at the very heart of biblical practice. It's not an add-on. It's not something we do in life and in spiritually in relation to God, because it's something we do at certain points in our life or whatever. Accountability is at the heart of all biblical practice. Right from the very beginning in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were accountable. And I also discovered just the other day that after the flood, there's a key verse there about being accountable. And when you turn over to the New Testament, even stories like the woman caught in adultery, this was about accountability, not for her so much, although that was involved, but for the ones who were accusing her as well. So it's all interrelated at the heart of biblical practice. And one of the reasons for that, it seems to me, is because when we're accountable to each other, in the best sense of that word, maybe the biblical sense of the word, we can begin to serve more correctly or rightly. Our practice is improved together. That's why I say this partnership between senior leaders and governors is really important. It's about us all working for the good of our school community. And it's also a way of ensuring fruitfulness, because when we recognise that there are things that we can improve on or develop, obviously we become more fruitful in our activity. So I would sum it up with, yes, we are accountable to God. That's a whole another area of the subject. But we're also accountable to each other within our communities, within a diocese, within an education service, Essex, and well beyond. We're also accountable to people around us, the immediate people, as well as being accountable for our actions and outcomes. It's a kind of summary of what I would see as, we might describe, something of a theological understanding of accountability. Clearly there's much more that could be explored, and I hope that just gives you a flavour. But I want to see that in the context of what is part of the role of governance that we call monitoring. And I want to give you a message really that to rethink or develop your thinking on what it means to be monitoring as governors within this context of accountability. And I start this from the perspective of the range of reports, information that you receive as part of governors' meetings. And I want to ask you the question, here it is. Can you grade the level of scrutiny these reports are given in your governance meetings? It might be an exercise to do as a head teacher. It might be an exercise to do as a chair of governors or a clerk even, to ask ourselves, what attention do we give to head teachers' reports? Well, I'll guarantee you that's where you'll give most of the attention. My question is it the right place? Is that the right percentage? You will receive a range of other professional reports, including reports from local authority advisors, diocesan advisors, and so on. What level of scrutiny do they get against how much you give to the head teacher's report or to the data reports, assessment and attainment eventually? Or is most of the time in governance meetings spent on finance reports and head teachers' reports? Perhaps even more on on finance reports. What's the percentage of time given? You won't be able to do that accurately, of course. But it is about where's the focus? Where are the priorities in terms of your monitoring? Now you'll notice I've not yet mentioned governor visit reports. My recommendation, I'm going to come to that a little bit more in a moment, is that governor visits reports are right down the list of the lower on the list, because you're much better holding the head teacher to account on professional reports. Why have they said this? What is being done about that? How has this helped you move forward? Than it is the kind of nice reports that we might get from our own visits as lay people, as governors who are not professional people. It's not to say they're not useful, it's to say that you'll be far more use and create far more opportunity for school improvement, I would suggest, through working on some of those other reports. And when I talk about level of scrutiny, I'm not meaning we get all tough and hard. I'm meaning we actually have a discussion, a conversation. One or two of you may have been on my questioning skills course, which we will be running again, which is about learning from coaching, of a coaching model in the context of how we talk through together what we're seeing and hearing from the various reports that we receive. But I'm a pragmatist, and I coined a phrase that we need to be pragmatic about how we do this thing called monitoring in a governance context. Michael Wilshire, love or hate him in the past, made a very important point about how governors often focus on that which doesn't really matter strategically. And that's again the key question we ask ourselves. Is this conversation that we're having about this report strategic, or is it about the operational stuff? So there are four, and I'm not telling you anything you probably don't know, but we ask the questions: where are we? What are our priorities? What is our plan? And how are we doing? They are the four areas of opportunity for conversation that will lead to greater fruitfulness if we have that openness and transparency around those four questions. Now, like you, I'm really conscious, as Carrie said at the top of the meeting, that we're coming along, I don't think we're out of, coming along and through a very long period of huge change and difficulty and challenge. And you will be facing that in your particular school or schools on a daily basis if you're a head teacher, and regular basis if you're a governor, member of a governing board. we still need to keep these questions in our at the forefront of our thinking as we help the school to deal, first of all, with the challenges today, but then to think about the challenges of the future. But I coin constantly the expression pragmatic governance, only to make the point that we don't have to do everything we used to do before 2020. We have learnt to focus and refocus some of our attention. And here are 3 questions that I think we should be asking as governors, and head teachers will want to ask us as well, in order that we learn from the last 2 years and not simply all rush to be back doing the level and the amount of meetings and things that we used to have. I think there's been a risk. You may disagree or not, but I think there's been a risk that in the urge to be back in person, we miss the need to question important questions like, is this meeting, is this visit, is this monitoring absolutely necessary? And I include the word absolutely because I want to give it that importance. So we need to be more selective, is my suggestion. And we may ask ourselves, of any meeting that's planned or any visit that we're going to make to the school or any monitoring we're going to do, and now I'm talking about monitoring on the ground rather than monitoring through the questions and discussion of a report, which I still think is the priority means. What will the outcome of that meeting likely to be? That just helps you decide whether it's necessary. Are we simply repeating what's being done by somebody else or somewhere else? Or have we already held that head teacher, as it were, to account, or that Senko to account, or whatever, in a different way, in a different conversation? Is it absolutely necessary? Because I think we have a round of meetings that we plan over the year, and we might have to ask ourselves, hey, can we not have this one? Can we be a bit, put things together rather than have yet another meeting? And this goes back, apart from anything else, to the well-being issue of our senior leaders and ourselves, because of the number of meetings we might be having. And then still to be asking the question, can this meeting or this visit be effectively carried out virtually? And I ask the question, is there a relationship already? Are you seeking additional facts? Will it help with well-being to have that meeting virtually? And although there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue, I guess, I think it's something we need to adapt to and continue to adapt to, and recognise that we can be more efficient and more effective in some areas and for some meetings if we carry on using what we've learnt to do. And then thirdly, which takes us in a slightly different direction, could a greater diversity of participation be possible online in some virtual meetings? In other words, might more people, as they often did during restrictions, be able to attend that meeting if at least they can attend virtually? And can we encourage people who cannot make in-person meetings by having that facility and that ability for us whenever we're planning our meetings? I think it's really vital that we ask that question. And this diversity issue goes to age, working people, people who commute, people of colour, and so on. So diversity across the board. All right, that was my input. You can discuss that in your breakout rooms. I just want to flag up 3 things that you could have a conversation about as well. Are these 3 things, these 3 areas of real interest to you from a governance perspective that you would like us to take forward and provide more input on as we go forward into the summer term and beyond? The whole building on the Global Majority Association launch, should we be doing something for diversity on governance boards? The green issue, which the NGA has promoted, And I now do have a course that's based or draws on the Church of England safeguarding training that puts a different, not a different spin, but approaches safeguarding from a different perspective, and be happy to run that maybe come September if governors would like that to happen. And finally, I came across this quote the other day, and I think it's true for all of us in whatever our role. And so do remember that we're the fork that can give some order to your spaghetti in terms of governance. We're here to help you with that, using some of the courses that are coming up, but also on a personal level, some support by conversation or by training for local governing boards. It's interesting to see one of the school represented today. I'm going to tomorrow virtually to deliver a session on Ofsted, preparing for Ofsted as governors. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you very much, Mike. Are there any questions for Mike before we move to breakout rooms? In that case, I will put you into your breakout rooms again to give you an opportunity to discuss together some of those things that Mike was chatting about. Right, I think we are all back, which is brilliant. Thank you very much to Mike and that presentation on governance, and hopefully that gave you some things to discuss and to consider in your breakout rooms and to take back into school with you. For our final session this morning, we have got an RE update from Ruth. So Ruth, it's over to you.
Good morning or nearly good afternoon. I will be really quick. I'm very conscious of your time, but as RE lead for the diocese, I just want to say thank you first of all for supporting religious education, and to say it's a really exciting time going forward with everything going on in the world of religion and belief. Just want to draw your attention to the importance of understanding which syllabus you follow, and the syllabus then informs your curriculum design. Syllabus and curriculum are two words that RE leads really need to be aware of and have full understanding. If your RE lead does not join the term lead meetings, which are held virtually and you can register online, please urge them to do so. These are our meetings with an opportunity to hear national, diocese and local updates. So please look for those. The diocese encourages schools to use their locally agreed syllabus, and I appreciate that we have 8 syllabuses across our diocese. I know a number of you today are sitting within Essex, and I just want to draw attention to the Essex agreed syllabus. For your information, the introduction sessions to the new syllabus are taking place on February the 8th. You should have had a save the date. Further information will be out through Education Essex, but this term there is an initial overview of the syllabus and an introduction to 3 different lenses in terms of theology, believing, philosophy, thinking, and human and social science, living. If those terms mean nothing to you, please ask your RE lead or contact me for some further discussion. I also want to draw your attention to teaching of Christianity. I know a number of you use the resource Understanding Christianity. It's a highly recommended resource. It does need evaluating, and you need to ensure that your Christianity teaching is encompassing the living world faith of Christianity.
Is that all right?
And it is covering living as well as thinking alongside the beliefs. We're offering some CPD. This is a quick push for some CPD tomorrow afternoon. If you're a school that looks at the Hindu religion, tomorrow afternoon there is a session on teaching Hindu tradition and community, led by Lat, who is a national advisor from the Association of Teaching of RE, and that's £30 plus VAT. I make no apologies for that, but they are really purposeful courses. I also want to draw your attention to anti-racist RE materials. These are free materials. Again, we're offering a session led by Lat, who will take you through how those materials can be woven in to any units of work, and that's taking place on the 24th of February. To continue supporting all schools with RE, I'm going to be offering a teaching and learning day where schools can sign up for a half-hour conversation to discuss their RE curriculum. And that's taking place on the 10th of March. If you're a school that would welcome a further conversation about RE from a governor perspective or head or your RE lead, please contact me. I want to finish with ensuring that religious education is enabling all our pupils to hold that balanced and informed conversation about religion, worldviews and belief. Please contact me if there's any further questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ruth. We are just after 12 o'clock, so if you do want to follow up on any of those issues with Ruth, then do get in contact with her directly, and she'll be more than happy to answer those questions. So it brings us to the end of our briefing this morning. We really do hope that you've got some things to go away and ponder on and to reflect on in school, and to see if there's anything that you want to change or have further conversations with people about. As mentioned, Reflect and Connect's coming out this afternoon, so if you do want to follow up anything with Andy, including that course that he offers, if you want some mental health first aiders on your staff, he has given us a discount for that course. All that detail is on the email, so do look out for that if you're interested. But in the meantime, we wish you a good rest of the week. We hope that the COVID challenges reduce for you and get easier rather than more challenging. And if you need any of us, advisors or myself or Mike, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you very much.